C.J. Nitkowski, Rangers analyst from Bally. Rejoins Shan and RJ. Bobby in for Choppy here on DFW Sports Station. Good morning, C.J. Thanks for waking up with us.
Shan, Bobby, good morning, man. How you guys doing?
Doing well. I would first like to give you props as I was watching the other night, and you start going into your barbecue methods. You start taking us inside your grill, and you tweeted what type of response you got. So just take us inside that Twitter account, what you were talking about barbecue-wise on TV.
Yeah, I don't even know how it came up or why it came up. My job, of course, is to kind of call a baseball game and break it down. But, randomness of thoughts that you have throughout a game. And I don't know what made me think about, you know what it was? They were playing the Marlins, and Jake Berger, who got traded from the White Sox, is now with him. And I just was thinking about the best burger I ever had. And recently I had smoked some bison with blue cheese and bacon in the smoker, and I made them as sliders. And actually had a buddy of mine over who I went to college with, who is now Lance Lynn's agent, ironically enough. And we had these smoked bison burgers. And for me, I don't consider myself any kind of great cook or anything, but they were the best burgers I had ever made.
Wow! So the bison, I'm normally not like a gamey type person, like venison, bison, but you put the bacon and the blue cheese in the burger mix.
Correct. And also some of the Lawry's kind of standard, I guess, with some steak seasoning that I put. Bison doesn't have a lot of fat in it, so you got to try to get some fat in there.
Yeah.
But it's pretty lean. It's a nice alternate to beef if you're trying to be a little bit healthier. But yeah, they came out fantastic, and we'll definitely have to do that again.
And the fans reacted?
Well, it's funny. Anytime we talk about food, we get way more reaction about any food that we bring up than the actual game. Dave and Emily said something so ridiculous about, 2 or 3 months ago when we were talking about waffles and pancakes, and they were trying to say that pancakes were better. I'm like, you guys could not be more wrong about this. And so I did a poll, and of course, waffles crushed it, and and I made them look silly. But yeah, there's something about the reaction you get when you talk about food on a baseball broadcast, sometimes than the actual baseball, which is odd this year in particular because it's all about the baseball this year.
All right, well, the last thing, because I love barbecue, and we are in Texas. Are you cooking briskets? Are you cooking pork butts? Like, how much grilling? Because if you're making smoking bison burgers, you sound pretty serious.
Yeah, so I was doing ribs that day, so a decent amount. I mean, I love doing it. My wife hates the smell. But I'm a fan. I'm an amateur. My brother-in-law is a tremendous cook, and so I lean on him once in a while as well. And then Mike Farron, who I work with on MLB Network Radio, is also kind of a go-to consultant when it comes time to firing up the grill. But no, I mean, I've tried all those things that you're talking about, but more often than not, that Amazing Ribs website's really good, and I'm usually smoking some ribs. Again, something my wife won't eat, so I rely on my children when they're home, especially my older ones from college, that they will partake in the smoker eating with me.
Hell yeah. C.J. Nitkowski, Rangers analyst here on 105.3 The Fan. Our buddy, our mutual friend, Jared Sandler, he seems to be pushing. He's on this social media push for Corey Seager MVP. How do you respond to Seager MVP status versus, of course, the great Shohei Ohtani, who we're watching these past few days?
Yeah, it's difficult. I mean, Corey Seager's having a career year. He's missed a little bit of time with 2 stints on the IL, but what he's doing, like last year we saw him set a career high in home runs for a single season. He's been even better this year. This has got to be probably the best start to his career of any season. Unfortunately, he has missed some of that time, so it hurts a little bit. It's nearly impossible, I think, for anybody to win an MVP unless you do something historic the way that Aaron Judge did, as long as Shohei Ohtani's healthy. It's just, I wonder sometimes about voters if they'll get Ohtani fatigue, and we'll see how much he ends up pitching the rest of the year. Originally, he was supposed to pitch today. They're going to give him at least this start off, and he may take a couple of more off. We will see. But unfortunately, I don't think there's anybody close enough on his heels to sway voters in a different direction. Again, unless you're going to do something historic and break the American League record for home runs the way that Aaron Judge did a year ago. Shohei Ohtani is healthy and producing, and he's got a legitimate shot at a Triple Crown this year on the offensive side. It's just really tough to take it away from him.
Okay, CJ, tell me if I'm being too soft here. If I'm just taking too participation trophy way of thinking about things. But we talk about Seager as the MVP of the league potentially. Could you make the argument that the MVP of this team, though, has been the faceless silhouette of just like the next man up. Like Dunning stepping into the rotation when DeGrom went down, and the way he's started pitching much better since Evaldi went to the IL. The way Duran and Simeon have leveled up their play every time Seager's gone out of the lineup. The way Garver stepped up, had an OPS over 1,000 for a 3-week stretch while Heim was out. Is as much of this team's success just about the way everybody has stepped up when the biggest names have been out of the lineup?
I don't think it's soft at all, and I think it's absolutely fair. Obviously, we wouldn't give necessarily a team MVP to a group, but you bring up an excellent point, and we've talked about it quite a bit. Teams are worried about depth all the time. And we saw this year at the deadline, August 1st, you're done. There are no trades afterwards, and teams trying to get even depth pieces into their organization to protect the rest of the way. The Rangers have had that from the beginning, and that depth has been tested in a way early on I don't think anybody was expecting. I think a lot of us forget that Jake Odorizzi was brought in this offseason to be that first depth piece in the rotation.
Yeah.
He gets hurt before the season even starts. We don't ever see him in a Ranger uniform. Then DeGrom goes down, and it's like you said, we go through the list. Dane Dunning stepping in, Cody Bradford a couple of times stepping in and making some big starts at times. Guys that were brought up from the minor leagues to go into the bullpen. Grant Anderson, right? Guys getting thrown in the fire right away in huge spots has been really important for this team because we know it's going to be a battle to hold on to this division. And when they do, and we look back and say it's just by a couple of games, I mean, it really does make a huge difference. All the things that you talked about, Ezekiel Duran as well, and then even the smaller pieces that they brought in. If you remember, Will Smith was a late sign. He signed the first week in March. I mean, you think about the first couple of months of the season where that bullpen would have been without Will Smith. We're talking a handful of games potentially on the loss side as opposed to the win side for the Rangers. So that had been really big. Travis Jankowski. Remember Travis Jankowski's story when they played those exhibition games? They told him he didn't make the team.
Yeah.
And then Leody ends up getting hurt, and they realized he wasn't going to be ready to start the season. Oh, never mind, you actually are on the team. He has been a key role player as well. So I think it's a fair point, and the Rangers just got to be tickled with the fact that they put the depth in place. You never know what's going to happen, and these guys have really answered in a huge way. So that has been a big part of the success story so far here as we're 120 games into the season, and I think it's a fair point to bring up as we get to the end and look back. The reality is to win the division, it's going to take multiple different parts of an organization and a team to make it work, but the depth pieces stepping up when you've needed them the most certainly has been a big story.
I'm glad you mentioned Leody there, and he was so huge for them and has been big for them during the season, but there's a stretch last year of, I think it was 6 to 8 weeks where he was really hitting the cover off the ball. And then he starts this season, same sort of thing, hitting the ball really well. But just like last season, it seems to have tapered off a little bit here. Last month plus, he's got a 494 OPS. Is this just a slump, do you think? Or do you think this is 2 years in a row now where maybe he just hits a little bit of a wall, a little bit of fatigue?
Yeah, it could be that, and it's always tough to identify unless there's something real mechanical that sticks out. I think more often than not, when you start to see guys struggle, you can see it a little bit in their body language. You can see them start to press a little bit. We saw the Rangers make the decision to have him bunt one time for a sacrifice to move a couple of runners up, and that's a sign as well, I think, and the game situation called for it, but also think, okay, he's not slugging and swinging the bat the way that he was earlier this year. What little things can he do to help us win? And you think about where they put him in the order and batting ninth, it was almost it was a luxury to have him doing what he was doing in the ninth spot, hitting in front of Marcus Semien and getting on base the way that he was. So slowing down here a little bit, he still has just a tremendous tool set when you think about everything that he can bring to the table with the legs and the glove and the arm, and certainly would love to see that back come around a little bit more. But I mean, there's no getting around the fact that he's in a little bit of a slump. They gave him a night off yesterday. We hadn't seen that alignment before with JP Martinez here now. He was in center, Jankowski in left, and then of course Adolis Garcia in right. And so the Rangers are in that position too, where they do have some great options if they need to mix things up when guys are scuffling a little bit.
Look at that bio on the fan cam. Bally Ranger analyst, former MLB pitcher, MLB Network. You have 6 Emmys?
I stole them, man. They give them to anybody, I think.
6-time Emmy winner. I was like, it's even called it for 6 years. He's been around that long. CJ Nitkowski here on 105.3 The Fan. Is Max Scherzer still that dude? He's my favorite pitcher, but he has faced the White Sox, the Athletics, and the Angels, who are struggling. What have you seen with Scherzer's stuff?
Yeah, it's funny. Yesterday or 2 days ago when he started, it might have been yesterday. Anyway, we were talking about him, and I had to stop myself for a second because I started to say Rangers ace Max Scherzer, and I looked to Dave for approval to use that phrase. I was like, wait a minute. Can I say that right now? Is that the right thing to say with Eovaldi on the IL and thinking about what other guys have done? And I got the nod of approval from Dave, so I felt better about it. I'll say this. So if you go back, the thing that we've harped on and kind of focused on, I was reading an article. There was a start he had against the Dodgers a couple before he left the New York Mets. He had been scuffling pretty badly with the slider. We know how important his slider is to what he does, and he realized what was going on kind of mid-game. He made a mechanical adjustment, and all of a sudden now his last 5 games, including the couple with the Rangers, the slider has been significantly better. And so while I get what you're saying, and sometimes with competition, like you want to see him take it to the Astros, take it to some of the tougher lineups in the game, he'll get those opportunities. But he looks really good. He looks, the old Max Scherzer, peak Max Scherzer may be asking a lot when he won Cy Young Awards, but he's not that far off. And he's bringing this intensity. I think the thing that's really stuck out is, there's an intensity to everything he does. But you didn't think necessarily the Rangers needed that. But listening to Dane Dunning talk about it a little bit, and it was almost like the shot in the arm you didn't realize you needed as a first-place team that Max Scherzer is now bringing to this club. It also gives you the luxury of not pushing Eovaldi too quickly. Right, we talked about that last night as well. Like, as much as we'd love to get him back into that rotation, the Rangers are at least holding serve and even creating a little bit of space here against the Houston Astros. And so that allows you to slow pay Eovaldi a little bit and get him strong and make sure he is ready to go to finish the season strong and then into the postseason. Then you talk about what could be and what that rotation could look like. And then not to get too far ahead of ourselves, but I did this last night, you start thinking about where we're going to be a year from now. A lot can happen a year from now. We understand that. But the idea of Eovaldi, DeGrom, Max Scherzer, John Gray, like this, as good as it could be right now, it could be even better at some point next year. A lot has to happen between now and then. But no, I think he is pretty close to peak Scherzer when you look at the velocity to go along with the adjustment that he just made on his slider, and nothing has changed from an intensity standpoint. You're supposed to slow down as you get a little bit older. At least I know I did. He's 39 years old, and he's out there with the energy of a 22-year-old.
What have you noticed in Jordan Montgomery's game in Arsenal?
Yeah, it's interesting. So we brought this up last night as well. So I start doing my research. I'm looking in, and I noticed that in his first 2 starts with the Rangers, he threw a combined 23 cutters. Yeah, well, that doesn't sound like that many. He threw 19 in his 21 starts with the Cardinals. Like, he wasn't using his cutter at all. So I'm like, oh, this is interesting. I asked Mitch Garver about it. He said he saw it. It looked good. He kept calling it. He kept throwing it. So that's going to be like our big storyline, right? I'm all excited I found this little nugget. He did not throw a single cutter yesterday.
Wow.
Not one. And so and I think it's actually what makes that interesting to me. It shows you how well he pitched and how deep his repertoire is. A few more 4-seam fastballs. He was throwing into righties quite a bit. He'll also throw what we call a front door 2-seam fastball, right? You start it kind of in off the plate and it catches the corner. He threw that really well yesterday. And then his changeup was really good. And if you're a left-handed pitcher with a plus changeup, that's really helpful because more teams than not are going to throw a bunch of right-handed hitters at you. And so if you got that good changeup working away from the right-handed hitters, you're going to be in a good spot. He's got a little bit, and it's not a fair comparison completely, but he has a little bit of a Lance Lynn feel to me. He's a big dude.
Yeah.
He's out there with the big beard. He's just kind of getting after it. Now, Lance, of course, would give you 120 pitches if you let him, and he'd throw 90% fastball, so it was a different style, and you're talking about a lefty and a righty, but there's something about the presence, the big kind of quiet presence that he's bringing to the table. It's a really nice ad for the Rangers as well to go along with Chris Stratton, who came over from the Cardinals in that deal. Somewhat sneaky moves, and we'll see how it goes, but almost feels like an audition to some degree as well. I mentioned where the Rangers starting pitching could be next year, but this is a guy who's a free agent at the end of the season. He gets a taste of Arlington. He gets a taste of this incredible ballpark, what we have, of course, with this amazing clubhouse and all the amenities and everything else. And so, yeah, he's here to help this team win right now, but it's also, hey, get a feel for Arlington, and perhaps he'll be in the mix for next year as well.
CJ, last question for you here. Since you mentioned Will Smith and how big a pickup he's been, especially during the early part of the season, but since the Aroldis-Chapman trade and Chapman pitching largely 7th and 8th inning, Will Smith continuing to close, Will Smith has a 4.5 ERA. Chapman continues to be dominant. What would you say is the biggest argument against potentially making a flip there as we head to the postseason?
Yeah, I don't know if there is one, quite honestly. I think Bruce Bochy right now just likes how it's been working out. I think the good news is there's not a selfish arm in that bullpen, right? Will Smith's not down there going, I really could only pitch the 9th inning. I'm really only good in the ninth. I'm not the same guy in the eighth. You're not dealing with any of that. I think it's a comfort level right now for Boch that has worked. If for some reason one starts to struggle, then sure, you could flip-flop if you have to get there. I know Will Smith ran into, what turned out to be a decision maybe that they regret, trying to get Patrick Bailey out on Sunday with a fastball in with a lefty on deck and mislocation. He hits a home run, they walk it off, and it's a couple of earned runs for Will Smith. But I wouldn't be too concerned. His slider has been so ridiculously dominant. We've brought it up a couple of times on the broadcast, and he leads with that pitch. He uses it more than any other, and it's just an absurdly low batting average, well under 100 against. So they're two different kind of guys, even though they're both left-handed. Boy, this Chapman stuff has been so fun, though, to watch and how good he has been. It's an event when he comes in the game. That was a really good move by the Rangers to do it as early as they did. Right, that was so far from the deadline that they did not allow other teams to get involved, and I think it's working out really well on the other side for Cole Reagans and getting that opportunity to start in Kansas City. But I mean, listen, it could happen. I think it's always a possibility, but I don't think that the Rangers are feeling that's something that they need to do right now. What they have is the ability to keep it open. Right, if they want to change their mind at any moment, they're not going to get any resistance from those guys down the pen. That's the good news.
Thank you for the knowledge, the barbecue talk, and the crystal clear connection. That's why he's a 6-time Emmy winner. We'll see you again tonight. C.J. Nitkowski on 105.3 The Fan. Thank you, brother. Appreciate you.
All right. Thanks for having me, guys.